Now, your health, your safety. This is ABC7 News.
Hope you had a great weekend. Welcome to our daily special called Getting Answers. We're asking experts your question every day at 3 o'clock to get answers for you in real time. Now today we have a 2-for-1. We were cut short last week with this duo because of a news conference, so we brought them back again. We have an infectious disease specialist and an employment attorney for the entire half hour, so you can ask your questions. Either one of them will answer, so post your questions on our Facebook live stream, YouTube Live, or check out our Instagram stories to submit a question now. So let me introduce you. Joining us today to help you get answers is right now employment attorney Angela Reddick-Wright of the Reddick Law Group and Dr. Peter Chin Hong, an infectious disease specialist and professor of medicine at UCSF here in San Francisco. Good to see both of you back with us.
Thank you.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, so Peter, let me start with you, Dr. Chin Hong, because this is very timely. Protesters in big cities this past weekend gathered to demand that their governors open up the economy. Some states like Georgia saying today some limited openings will happen this weekend. But I read a New York Times article saying that testing needs to triple before we can do that safely. So what are your thoughts on that?
And Kristen, we've been talking about this on and off in this show, and we still haven't been at the levels of testing that we really need. And again, it's like we're operating in a black box with wax in our eyes. I mean, I can't tell you if we relax shelter in place, how we'll be doing, because again, we don't have sensitive measures of what's going on in the community. Similarly, on the East Coast with these protesters, again, it's hard for people to see what's going on in the community because, again, this is an invisible virus. For the most part, people transmit before they have symptoms, and you can't look at someone to tell you if they're sick or not, and that's why we need testing.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I read another article, Peter, that says for every one person who tests positive, you might assume there are 50 to 80 more cases out there that we don't know about. How reliable are studies like that, really?
I think that's a little bit on the high side. I think a conservative estimate, like, some colleagues here at UCSF and at Stanford have come up with a more like times 2 to 3. And if you think about it, with statistic we think about with infectious diseases called R0, it's kind of like the number of people one person generally infects around them. And for SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19, it's about 3. As opposed to measles, which is about, more than like around 10. So that kind of gives you a sense of the number of people in the circle who may be affected. So I think that, it's somewhere in between those two numbers based on where we have testing rolled out. Of course, if you have testing rolled out, like in South Korea in a community, which is some communities in the United States, that unknown will be a little bit lower.
Right. Bolinas is starting to test everybody. We can talk more about that in a little bit, but I want to bring in Angela because what's very timely in your area of expertise is this. End of last week, we were talking about how that $349 billion program for, small business and individuals, that money has run out. However, we're hearing there's a new round that Congress and the White House are close to passing. So can you talk about how that package might look like and how that might help small businesses and individuals?
Okay. Well, we don't know the details as of yet, but we do know that Congress and the White House are considering a second, and I've heard even rumors of a possible third stimulus package. And what I'm hearing from the congressional folks here in Los Angeles is last week they did, and the week before, they did a number of town hall meetings to actually speak with their constituents, both individuals and businesses, and even church and nonprofit leaders to understand what their conditions were, what their positions were, how did they apply for funds, and what were the challenges in applying, and what banks for businesses and churches and nonprofits, what banks they were applying through, and what their experiences were. And so I know one of the congresswomen here in particular says that she's planning to take that information back as they vet a second stimulus bill to make sure they try to address and make the process easier the second time around. And also to make sure that the dollars actually reach those who they were intended to reach. So on the individual side, reaching the low income employee or the employee that's been laid off or furloughed. And on the business side, actually meeting the needs and incorporating and making sure small businesses have an opportunity to access those funds.
All right, Angela, I want to ask you something else that I'm seeing in the news, which is this past weekend we heard about some firings of workers who spoke up against conditions at their company, Amazon being one of them. What rights do essential workers have during this time?
Well, essential workers have the same rights as non-essential workers and workers have all the time. And that's the right to work in a safe environment, an environment that meets all the requirements for OSHA, as well as our state and our federal labor laws, and a right that when they speak up, if they feel that something's wrong or that they're not being fully protected, in this instances, being provided the health and safety requirements that they need, that when they speak up, that they will not be retaliated against. And so the right to protest and the right to note when you feel that your employer's not doing what it should do in terms of creating a safe environment, that right should be protected and individuals should not be retaliated against for speaking up.
All right, before we take a break, I want to ask a question of each of you from our viewers, and those questions are just pouring in right now. For Peter, a medical question or a health question. Thomas is asking, I live in a large apartment building. Can the virus spread through the building's ventilation?
That's a great question, Thomas. And I think a lot of people in the community ask that question because, of course, there have been media reports of finding virus in vents and things like that. There's no evidence that when we find these viruses out in the air or whatever, that they are alive, because we're not really culturing all these viruses. What we know about this virus comes from, right now we've had quite a few clinical studies, and the main transmissions that have been documented in the traditional way, which is, again, that droplet coming from the infected person's mouth or nose, being a little heavy and falling within 3 feet. So if you stand 6 feet above, beyond, or wear a mask if you're close by and you can't control social distance, you're generally going to be safe. And I stick with that pretty much because, again, it acts like other stuff that I know about.
All right, thanks, Peter. Angela, Rachel is asking, I applied for unemployment on March 15th, and they sent me papers telling me that what I would receive, but I haven't gotten a dime. So now what?
Simply, Rachel, I'm really sorry to hear that's happened to you. And unfortunately, that's the case with so many others who've had to apply for unemployment. And the simple answer is our EDD office, our Employment Development Department office, which administers unemployment benefits, is just backed up. I mean, they've been overwhelmed by the number of requests, both from traditional employees as well as independent contractors that have been applying for these benefits and that qualify for the benefits. So we know that Governor Newsom is aware of this, and in his different press conferences, he's addressed the issue and said that he's, asked the EDD to expand their telephone hours as well as their office hours, asked them to increase the capacity on their website so that people can get through, asking former EDD employees to come back and work during this temporary situation. So my best advice is just to continue calling, continue trying to get through on the website, and individuals are getting through, but it may take a full day, some hours, or days in some instances. But hopefully we'll start to see some reprieve in a short time.
Yeah, all right, patience is needed, but who can afford that patience? So it's frustrating. But
right.
Angela, thanks for that answer. Peter, Angela, let's take our conversation over to our live streams. We'll take a short break on air, but of course the show never stops on our live streams. We're continuing to answer more questions, so join us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or ABC7news.com right now.
In commercial break.
All right, boy, you guys, we just have so many questions from viewers today. Sultan wants to know from Peter, how does the blood plasma from COVID-19 disease survivors help? Peter, are you with us?
Yeah, sorry, my work wireless just went out. That's to tell you how sometimes it's unstable. It hadn't happened before.
Okay,
I'm back.
Should I repeat that question for you, which is
yeah,
Sultan?
that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, and I know there's some trials starting, so this is timely. Sultan wants to know, how does the blood plasma from COVID-19 disease survivors help?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So what we know about this particular disease state, COVID-19, is that early on, people are not making antibodies, but they do make it later on, particularly people who have successfully recovered from infection. So the idea is because the sick people early on don't make their antibodies, which are like the army to fight and neutralize the virus in its tracks, we give people the army of other people who've been successful in creating those fighters. So in convalescent serum, we know that we identify people who have successfully overcome COVID-19. We enrich the product with these fighters, and we give the fighters or unleash them to neutralize the virus in its tracks for people who are very sick in the ICU, for example.
All right, Peter, thank you for that response. Angela, I was going to ask you something, but we're about to come back on air in 15 seconds, so we'll take that question live on air. All right, you guys ready to go? Round two, here we go.
15 seconds now.
Oh, now 15 seconds, okay. Sounds good. Wow, we are getting a really great question from Goldie Pennywell about Social Security. Okay, yeah. And then Kevin about unemployment as Uber, Lyft. Let's go with that. Welcome back. We are on air with employment attorney Angela Reddick-Wright of the Reddick Law Group and Dr. Peter Chin Hong, an infectious disease specialist and professor of medicine at UCSF. I want to address this one to you, Angela. Kevin wants to know, can I apply for unemployment as an Uber Lyft driver? Please answer, because I tried asking last question, but of course we had to cut our answer short then and our conversation short. But can he?
Absolutely. That's part of what the Federal Stimulus Act provides, also called the CARES Act, that individuals who normally would not qualify for unemployment benefits, such as independent contractors or gig economy workers, such as Uber or Lyft drivers and Postmate drivers and so forth, that they can apply for unemployment benefits through the expanded CARE Act or Federal Stimulus Act.
All right, that's a good one. Now we have one for Peter. Al is asking, when do you think testing will be available to all of us in California? Boy, I bet you wish you had an answer to that.
I mean, sometimes I dream about that at night. And, you know, I just pinch myself in the morning when I wake up because that day still hasn't arrived. But there's some progress. I mean, like you mentioned, in some communities through various initiatives, the whole community is going to be screened. So you heard about Bolinas. The Mission in San Francisco is another community that's going to be screened at some point soon. But these are like the exception rather than the rule. And I'm just continuing to be hopeful every day, and I'm not sure when that will happen. It is one of Gavin Newsom's 6 conditions. So I'm hoping that will stimulate people to begin being creative about how do we roll this out on a large scale.
Okay. Here is a question I think that a lot of people will be interested in, Angela. Glenn is asking, I'm over 65 and heeded, I think he means, the governor's stay-at-home order for those over 65, March 14th. Am I eligible for unemployment or disability insurance?
Yes, for sure, unemployment, if you were working and you're not working now because of the state orders, you can apply for unemployment benefits because you've essentially been furloughed or required to work from home or not to go into work. So you definitely qualify for unemployment. Disability will depend on whether you've tested positive for the virus or some other illness or other sickness or illness that could lead to disability or be qualified as a disability. So that you would need to first start with your doctor, and then if it qualifies as a sickness or illness, then you could possibly apply for disability benefits.
All right, Angela, thanks so much for that. Peter, here's another one that's coming in for you from Jennifer. She says some places are charging a lot of money, $205 for antibody tests. Are those tests trustworthy? That's an interesting one because I also read an article today in the New York Times about a lot of false negatives with some of the tests out there. And I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing, but it sounds like there's a lot of unreliability.
Yeah, so it's a very complex issue for the following reasons. Number one, there are about 100 different tests, so it depends on which company you use. Not all of them are FDA approved. Not all of them are specific for COVID-19 because there are other coronaviruses, for example, that cause the common cold that could cross-react with some of the platforms. The good ones are specific for COVID-19. The other issue is we don't know what it means yet. Sure, we've heard about Italy, Germany, for example, maybe using them as a pass to go back to the work. But again, we don't know what it means. We don't know how long it lasts, and who's going to get the antibodies.
Okay, yeah, more questions than answers at this point, right, Peter? Okay, Angela, here's one coming in for you from Sarah Ga. She says, I've been unemployed since December, and I have a new job now, but I'm not able to start until the ordinance is lifted due to training. So will I get the extra $600 to help me out? Right now, I'm only getting $450. That's a good question.
So, yes, so you would qualify for unemployment benefits because you're not currently working. And part of what the CARE Act does, it extends unemployment benefits to individuals who were about to start a job, such as in your instance, or have been hired, but then were not able to start work due to the current pandemic. So yes, for sure, you should apply for unemployment benefits to get that expanded $600 per week benefit.
Okay. This one for Peter. Mike is asking, I need surgery for a non-life-threatening condition. When can I expect that surgeries be allowed again in most hospitals?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the institution. At UCSF, for example, we are starting by sort of like unleashing testing of asymptomatic people who are coming in for surgery. So again, I would, even though your original hospital might have given you an unclear date for when that surgery might occur, I would call them again and ask them because things are changing. All
right. Sounds good. We'll do that. Natasha wants to know, I am on Social Security. I got my stimulus check deposited in bank account on the 15th. I'm sorry, that's actually a response to somebody else's question. Here's another one from Nancy that I think would be relevant for you, Angela. Based on the current events and its predictions, I'm sorry, I'm totally jumping all over the place. All these Facebook answers, comments, they're jumping because they're coming up so quickly before I can finish reading one. But what I actually really want to know is this one, which is Nancy asking, my husband is a 1099 contractor. We filed, but the benefits came back to zero because it shows no earnings. So how do we get his earnings to EDD right now?
So I can't detect whether she's talking about unemployment benefits or the federal stimulus benefits that's going to every taxpayer that falls within a certain category. Do you think it's related to unemployment benefits?
I don't know. You know what? I can reply to her during our commercial break and see if we can get more detail on that. So,
and if it's unemployment benefits, if he can show that he has been furloughed or been separated from his employment or had his hours reduced in some way, even if he's an independent contractor, then he should be able to apply for unemployment benefits. Right. The federal stimulus dollars, the $1,200 to individuals or $2,400 to couples, that's based on your annual income as reported in your 2018 or your 2019 tax returns.
Got it. So
if it came back as zero, if that's what she's talking about, and it came back as zero, maybe they make too much money to qualify.
She said yes,
for the benefits.
Unemployment. That's what she meant. Unemployment.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, he should be able to apply for the unemployment benefits.
Okay.
But they base unemployment benefits, the state benefit, on how much you were making. So if he wasn't making anything, maybe he hasn't paid into unemployment or hasn't paid into it for a while. And so that might limit what he's able to get.
Got it. By the way, it was Nancy, and Nancy says, thank you, Angela. Okay, Peter, Angela, let's take this conversation over online to our live streams. Keep those questions coming, and we'll take a short break here on the air and be right back with more.
Thank you.
All right. Guys, I got to figure out how when I'm looking at a comment, I can make the Facebook not refresh.
I was seeing that rolling by, and it's tough to capture that.
It really is, because we're getting so many, which is great, because what you are each bringing to the table, there's certainly a lot of interest. So let's see if we can find a few other ones. Okay, for Peter, boy, this is a tough one too. Okay, I've seen this one. I'm going to address the racial disparity question when we're back on air, so I'm not going to touch that right now because I know that's just coming out of San Francisco and super important. So, Angela, I've got another one for you.
Okay.
Okay. I am on SSI. and have direct deposit and have not received anything. I've seen a lot of questions about direct deposit, so maybe you can just give us some general, instructions and guidance on how best to receive your money.
Right. So definitely if you have an accountant or bookkeeper or financial advisor or even the person that you file your taxes with, I would definitely reach out to them to see if they can help you to understand your filing status and whether when you last filed, if you provided your direct deposit information. But assuming you have all of that information, what's been reported is that individuals who filed in 2018 or 2019 or who even recently completed the short form filing on the IRS website, that if you provided and used your direct deposit information, that's the information that will be used to distribute the funds. If you did not use direct deposit information, then it will be a paper check.
Okay, Angela, that sounds great. We'll pause you right there because we're coming back on air right now. You hear the voice of God, aka our director.
5, 4, 3.
All right, we're back on air with employment attorney Angela Reddick-Wright of the Reddick Law Group and Dr. Peter Chin Hong, an infectious disease specialist and professor of medicine at UCSF. Peter, let's start with you because San Francisco officials today showed a map showing data in which we see which zip codes here in San Francisco, which neighborhoods have the highest infection rates and number of cases per number of residents. Can you talk about how that illustrates some of the socioeconomic disparities that we're seeing with this disease?
First of all, I would say that the map is not surprising to me. And when I looked at it, it actually looked like deja vu all over again. That's because it's not just for COVID-19. We see very similar maps for other diseases like asthma, diabetes, other chronic diseases. So it was not surprising that COVID-19 is overlaid exactly in the same distribution of where the hot zones for infection are in San Francisco County itself.
By the way, I should say those areas seem to be the South of Market, #1, right, where there's that large homeless shelter, and then #2, the Mission District. Go on.
Correct. And it's just because many of the risk factors for getting the disease, again, if you remember how it gets to you, it falls within, you have to be to a certain distance to really get it, and not wearing protection like a mask if you can't control it. So there are multiple reasons why there's this disparity. First of all, people can't control their social distance or their environment many times. #2, it's a luxury to work from home. Many of the high-tech companies did that even before shelter in place. But if you think about our frontline workers or food services, I worried about this early on, actually. I was going to Safeway, I was looking at my cashier, and people packaging things in the shelves, and they weren't wearing any masks, and there were lots of people walking by them. And this was during shelter in place. So again, that's a challenge for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
In some communities, it's just not easy to wash your hands. During the day, you're out and about. How do you wash your hands in between? You can't even buy hand sanitizer in Walgreens anymore. So again, multiple challenges specific to this infection, but underlying causes not specific to this infection.
Right. That's something public health officials obviously have to consider as they're passing these ordinances to protect everybody. Angela, I'm seeing two ladies with the same question, essentially, Linda and Kelly. Linda says, my unemployment ends August 20th. Will it continue 13 weeks more due to COVID? And Kelly's unemployment will expire shortly. So will there be an auto extension?
There should be. The original rules under the CARE Act were to add an additional $600 for every individual that is on unemployment, and then to add an additional 13 weeks once your benefits run out. So that should be the case.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you both so much. Let's continue this conversation on our live streams for a little bit longer, but we'll take a break here live on the air. Always great having you, Angela and Peter, with us to offer your insights and information. All right, join us over on live stream.
Stand break.
All right. Hey, we have another one for you, Angela. I'm not sure this is one that relates to you. It's really more of a consumer one, but I'm going to ask it anyway in case you have an answer. We had to cancel a cruise. They offer half the money back in cash and half for a future cruise credit. I don't foresee ever cruising again. We're both seniors. Is there a way to get a full refund? You want to touch that one or no?
That is not in my expertise, but I'm hearing that lots of folks are having issues, whether it be with cruise liners, hotels, trips that are planned. And what I'm hearing are people are just calling up individually, and the companies are making decisions with respect to individual cases. So there may be an opportunity for that listener to call and get a different result.
Okay.
And that applies to me too, Angela.
Okay.
Yeah. See, I knew it was great bringing the two of you together.
Looks like I'll have to get up to date on that then.
Yeah. We have about 45 seconds, so I want to ask a last one of Peter. Lauren Madrigal wants to know, based on current events and its predictions, is work most likely going to start up again later this year or not until next year in 2021? Best guesses, because for all of us, it's a guess.
Schools and work are going to start up, but it'll be different from the way we've thought about it. So I anticipate it'll be shift schools and shift work.
What does that mean?
It means there'll be a group, half of the people will go from like, say, 8 to 1, and then the other group will go from 1 to 6. So that there'll be fewer people and they can maintain social distance. Schools will also be split like that. That's my prediction.
All right. Well, we can each offer our predictions based on the latest science, and of course, new information comes out every day. So you guys, let's keep this conversation going. But thank you both. Yes. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, coming back on air in 5 seconds. Welcome back. We're now able to bring you even more content now that we have this new platform at 3 o'clock every day. And that means we get more from our special correspondent, Dr. Alok Patel. He's part of our coronavirus team of experts. Every day, he's going to talk directly to you in a segment we're calling Doctor's Note.
Antibody tests can tell us who's been exposed to coronavirus, and this is really important information as we start talking about reopening society. But there's been some concerning headlines about their accuracy. I'm Dr. Alok Patel, and I'll explain more on today's Doctor's Note. So quick recap, antibody tests or serologic tests check your blood for specific proteins your immune system makes. If you had coronavirus in the past, your blood should have these proteins or antibodies present. These tests can hopefully tell us who's immune or who's still at risk. So far, the FDA has approved 4 antibody tests. Yet there are over 90 currently being marketed and sold, and some of these non-FDA approved tests are not nearly as reliable as the companies say they are. For example, in Texas, one ER spent $500,000 buying a bunch of antibody tests. The company said they were 93 to 97% accurate, but the local health department found they were closer to being 20% accurate. That's not even in the same ballpark. And now a police investigation is underway. This is only one example, but it represents what can happen when the government sacrifices quality for speed. With defective tests, you can get both false negatives and false positives. In either case, the tests are useless. Now, New York is set to do statewide antibody testing with an FDA-approved test, and we may very well see more of these antibody surveys being done all over the country. According to the World Health Organization, we don't yet know what the tests say about long-term immunity, but at least if we're using FDA-approved tests, we know they're validated, and we can use the data to tell who's been exposed. Hopefully, in due time, we'll have more high-quality tests available everywhere for everyone. But before then, if you come across an at-home coronavirus antibody test you can buy online, or you see them available at your local clinic, do your research and ask questions. The last thing you want right now is faulty information.
All right, thank you, Dr. Alok Patel. Now, we want to tell you about a very special 3 p.m. show tomorrow because as the parent of a high school junior, I've realized that COVID-19 has completely changed the landscape of college applications. You probably heard some schools are doing grades, others are doing pass-fail. The SATs are now optional for many colleges, and the SATs college board that administers them says that by fall they could be take-home. So what does this all mean, right? Summer internships are canceled, research projects canceled. How can your teen stand out if they're applying to college? So tomorrow we're bringing together the director of undergraduate admissions for the entire UC system. also a leading Bay Area college counselor, to talk about what are the new requirements and what your child can do to navigate this landscape successfully. Join us for that. Feel free to go to abc7news.com, in which we have a section you can submit your questions. Share this with your student, with your school community, with your parent friends. We hope to get you information that you can use. Thank you so much for joining us today on this new interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here tomorrow and every day at 3 o'clock on air and on live stream. Take care.